today's lecture topic is fire and water in the body from the classical Chinese medical perspective. So from the Chinese medical perspective, there are these various forces in the body that can be categorized different ways. So you can categorize them according to yin and yang. You can categorize them according to the five phases, the five sort of elements of Chinese medicine. You can categorize them according to their fullness or their emptiness. But one of the most interesting kind of dynamics or polarities in the human body is the polarity between fire and water. So fire is written like this, and water is written like this. These two different ways of writing fire. The hexagram form of these characters was like this. A solid line at the bottom, and then a broken line, and then a solid line for fire. So inside it's broken, but outside it has this kind of yang, more solid active force. And then water is just the opposite. It has a broken line with a solid line in the center, and then another broken line. And this character, in fact, this Chinese character was originally written like this. So kind of a pictographic form of the trigram, maybe as you might see it in nature. So with this picture, you can almost see, for instance, if this were a river flowing, the water that's close to the shore might be more hesitant or broken or diffuse in its movement. But in the middle of the river, the flow would be kind of this solid, powerful kind of force. The fire radical is just the opposite. So these two together form this kind of polarity in the body. You have the warmth and the kind of active heat of fire, and then the cool kind of storage ability of water. When we look at the organs in the body, the solid visceral organ that epitomizes fire is the heart, of course. And we talked about the heart in one of the earlier lectures. We looked at a line from chapter 8 of the Yellow Emperor's Classic, the treatise of the Library of the Miraculous Orchid, of the Secret Library of the Miraculous Orchid. And in that line we saw how the heart was the official of the kind of sovereign ruler, and the kind of spirit brightness, or the Shun Ming, emerged from it. But we saw how Shun, the character Shun, was a picture of, from above, the three lights coming down. So this sort of image of light. And this was this character which was earlier depicted as a lightning bolt or something. So we saw that the spirit aspect was really had a lot to do with light and kind of electricity, of this exchange of positive and negative forces that creates light and a lot of energy. And then of course Ming, we have the sun and the moon. So again, kind of reiterating this theme of light. But there is also this kind of electrical component included in it. It's just to touch on the line from the heart. I want to take a look now at the line that refers to the kidneys from that same chapter. So it starts with, it's identical in form to the line that described the heart, but it uses different characters to describe the kidney. So it's Shunzhe. This character Shun refers to the kidneys. This character is interesting. It has, up in the upper left, you see this portion here, which was originally written something like this. and in another form, it was written like this. In the oracle bones, so in the earliest kind of source of writing, those early turtle plastrons that would have the question that the diviner would have written on there. It would have been written like this, or also another version, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the variety. This is from a later bronze script, but it shows the same kind of form. We have here this form again. So that's this portion here. If you look at this, it's fairly clearly an eye. So it's, you know, like an eye that would be in the head. And on its own, this character Chun, which is a picture of an eye, so this is Chun. It means like a minister, but it also has the implication of like a slave or a servant. So here we have the eye, and the eye, of course, is what we use to actually detect or receive light. So we saw with the line that referred to the heart, there's all this light imagery. But now when we come to the kidneys, one of the first things we see is this image of the eye. So the actual kind of receptacle or receiver for the light, the place in the body that allows us to even know that there is any light, or to kind of receive that sort of energy and make sense of it, is this part here. This next part is the right hand. So it would have been written something like this originally. So we have the eye and the hand. And together, when you have these two together in this form, it makes the character Qian. This character Qian means firm or solid. It can also mean, it can also take the form of a verb, which means to have like solid control of something. For instance, to have like solid control of like one's men or something. If you were undertaking some sort of endeavor and you really wanted to have control of, you know, the people around you, it would be this Qian. So it has this notion of solidity, or that kind of firmness. Below, and we didn't see this portion of the character with relation to the heart, is this character for flesh. So this was originally written something like this. Now, of course, it looks a lot like the character for the moon. Yeah, but in this case, it actually refers to flesh, and it originated in this sort of pictograph. Here you can kind of see, you know, if this were like a cut of meat or something like that, you could almost see the kind of bundles of the muscle that would be divided up by the fascia, this picture here. All of the other organs that are described in chapter 8, each one of the organs has this flesh radical as part of it. The only organ that doesn't have the flesh radical is the heart. And the heart also takes this kind of premier position as the ruler, but it also is seen as being somehow kind of, you know, separate from the body, or independent in a way from the physical body, in a way that none of the other organs are. And we'll touch on that point here in just a moment, after we're done introducing the kidneys. So shenzhe, the kidneys, it says that shenzhe is the 做强之官. It's the maker of strength, the official of the producer of strength. But this 做强 is very interesting in relation to the kidneys. This first part here, this 做, which means to do or to make. On the left we have a person, sort of in profile, and this character nowadays is written like ren, a person. So we have this person. And then this portion here has a very interesting etymology. This is ja, and ja basically means to make something, or to embroider something, to weave something. And it was originally written like this. Another way of writing it was like this. And yet another way of writing it was like this. And it's a little difficult to kind of make out what this might be, but it has to do with stitching or embroidering, and it especially refers to the collar portion of a garment. So when you had a garment, if you've ever seen sort of like Tibetan robes, or any other kind of very fancy robe or whatnot, they almost always save the finest and the best fabric, the most elaborately or most kind of embroidered fabric, for the part around the collar where it comes together. And that's where you'd see this very fine and kind of technical work performed, this work that would require a lot of time, but it would also be very tightly knit, and it would allow the garment to, where it's under a fair amount of stress at the neck and where the whole thing is hanging, it would allow it to be both strong but also soft and kind of gentle on the body. And if you think about a garment where things kind of come together and where you're actually kind of clipping something together, is there at the throat. So like the kind of the most the simplest kind of garment that I can think of would be something like a Roman cape, where you had this large cape. It's just a large piece of cloth that could be used as a blanket or form a tent or anything else, but it comes together in some sort of clip or some sort of brooch. And you'd often see you'd see pictures of this where there would be this elaborately crafted brooch of some kind that would allow the cape to come together. And it was the same for the early Chinese garments. They had these garments, and then the part that was very well stitched or done together is this portion here at the throat, this zuo. So we already know that the kidneys have something to do with this kind of this production, because we have a person doing it. And almost every time you see the person radical together with another portion, it refers to some sort of action. So a person doing this, a person making this thing, is zuo, is to do or to make. And if you've traveled, say to Guatemala or somewhere like that, you'll oftentimes see people sitting in their hours of, it could be men or women, but when they have time to themselves, they'll oftentimes sit there and work on these very elaborate crafts. It might be beadwork. I know in Guatemala I saw some really awesome embroidery being made by the Mayan women who live around Lake Atitlan. But it takes a long period of time. It takes a lot of technique and skill to do. So it's this zuo, to make or to do. And it's the official of that, plus this next character, Qiang. There's an alternate way of writing this character, which was, let's see, how was that? This is another way to write that same character, but today we're going to look at this version. Qiang. Qiang means strength. Strength, or to strengthen. But it's very interesting that they used these parts to create the character for strength. In the first part, we have this portion on the left. This portion on the left was this compound. This would have been this kind of compound recurve bow. So, you have a bow. Your typical bow is a simple a simple single curved bow. And for a long bow, the strength that's in the bow comes from first distorting that curve and then releasing it and allowing, you know, the arrow to fly. But in this recurve bow, you're doubling the amount of curvature, so the amount that you can kind of distend it, and you're able to create a more compact bow and still have the same amount of power. So this was in early Chinese technology. This allowed the Chinese to gain dominance over the people around them, because those who simply had the simple bow, they were large, they were cumbersome. To have a bow that was really powerful, it might be even taller than the person themselves, so it was hard to move around. It'd be very difficult on horseback to fire a bow like that. But with the recurve bow, which was smaller, they could generate the same amount of power, be more compact. So it would be like something very high tech at the time to have this sort of shaped bow. So we have this curved shape, and then the second portion, in a strange way, echoes this idea, because we have a line, and then this picture for a field, another line, again a picture for a field, and then another line. So we looked at this character when we looked at, in the very first lecture, when I talked about Dr. Liu's book, which was originally written as 思考中医. We saw that this portion above a heart makes the character 思, which is to think or to contemplate. And this portion here is actually a field. And the field shows the furrows and rows, or the irrigation system in the field. So you have parts that were higher, that would be mounted up. They could be in rows and whatnot. And then you'd have these furrows and channels for the water to flow through. So this portion, at times was written with lots of lines in it, depicting kind of the elaborate working of the soil to create an irrigated place. But you also have these lines here, and if you've ever seen fields even today, those that aren't irrigated by these large kind of irrigation pipes, that move in circles and water everything. You see them from above when you're flying. You'll see these circles on the ground below you from the plane where it's being irrigated. But if you think about how things were done back in the day, they would have a dike system with water flowing through these dikes that ran between the fields, and then there would be sluice gates periodically that would allow you to open and close the sluice gates and allow the water to flow in and irrigate the fields. So together, this bow, together with this kind of irrigation system, both of those indicate strength. When you think about that, I think it becomes readily apparent how it could mean strength. This Gong character, or radical, with this recurve bow, because we know when we pull it back and we release it, it has a lot of power, a lot of strength. But here with this, how it is that this kind of field irrigation system relates to strength is a little less kind of readily comprehended. But if you think about the strength or the virility, say, of a piece of land that you're trying to cultivate for crops or something like that, you need to have these kind of technical elements introduced into the field. You need to have built up these strong dikes that can hold the water and that can resist, rain and everything else, that will hold the water up in these ducts, and these sluice gates that work very well to be able to properly irrigate your fields and for things to actually work well together. So the kidneys are the official that kind of, as a person sort of weaves or creates through technical skill, this strength, which is epitomized by this kind of recurve bow, and then also by the fields with their irrigation. If you think about the human body, just a few examples of how this might relate to the kidneys. The kidneys in Chinese medicine, they are kind of present in the bones. So the strength of your bones comes from the kidneys, which in fact play this role of allowing fluids out of the body and reabsorbing rather, electrolytes, the minerals, the calcium and phosphorus and whatnot that allows your bones to be made. And on top of the kidneys, we have these adrenal glands. The adrenal glands on top of the kidneys, whenever you're in a sort of a fight or flight response, or let's say even you drink a big cup of coffee and you're on the go, your body actually starts to take calcium and take minerals from your bones to use for metabolic activity and for all of your kind of activities and things. So your bones, when you're in a period of kind of a sympathetic state, an on-the-go type of state, the kidneys they're changing this system of sluice gates, so to speak, in order to have you be able to go and do things and be active. Then when you retire and you rest and you're in a parasympathetic mode and you're resting and digesting and you're maybe sleeping at night, just the opposite happens. So the sluice gates might be closed, and then the water, kind of the minerals and whatnot that are there would be stored back in the bones. Here with this Gong, when we think about it's not a bad picture of the human spine, which has a curve at the neck, a curve at the back, a curve at the lumbar area, and then another curve at the sacrum. So if a person's nose and eyes were here, we have this, it would be up here obviously. We have a curve at the back, and then sort of a convexity along the top of the back, a concavity, and then again the sacrum kind of tucks back under. And that's the healthy state of the back. As we age and as our bones lose in mineral density, this healthy kind of strong curve that we had, when we were kids and when we were young, eventually it starts to look more like this. We start to lose the lumbar curve. Well, you can get more pronounced lordosis, which is a more pronounced lumbar curve as you age. But the typical picture, we think about an old person, especially in olden times, is they're kind of curved over. So they start to form this kind of curved shape with their legs, and they're holding on to a cane or whatnot. So this type of strength is lost as over time our bones become less dense through this process of minerals being leached out of them. But the kidneys themselves, they're the official that makes this 做强. If you remember with the line of the heart, we had the official of the Junju, the sovereign ruler, and the Shanming, the spirit brightness, emerged from them. So you might already be asking yourself, what is it that emerges from the kidneys? What emerges from the kidneys is技巧之言. So the 技巧 emerges from it, chu yan. This 技巧 could simply be translated as like a knack at something, a skill at something. So, when you get really good at something, it could be like anything from a magic trick to whatever it is that you practice in your daily life. Maybe you're a really good gardener, maybe you're good at knitting, which I think is a premier example, because if you don't know how to knit, you can't make anything. If you do know how to knit, and once you get in there, it's kind of like the sky is the limit with your speed and your skill and the degree to which you can do details or create or craft something. That's all this kind of knack or skill. If we look at this part here, this G was originally written like this. Again, we have a person, this person radical. Ren, this person, which is someone doing something or some sort of actor. But this portion here, it means it's typically meant to mean a branch or to prop something up or something like that. But if you look closely at the etymology, it's a hand holding something, holding some kind of tool or something. It was also written like this, with this portion both above and below. In my mind, and at least in terms of this context, and from what I've seen, the way this part is used in other characters, it looks like a hand holding a tool of some kind. So when you think about technical skill, at least a human's kind of technical skill, the use of tools allows us to, step far forward of what we could do with simply our bare hands. So in the case of the ruler with the heart, with the Junju, we had this character here. This Jun, which was the mouth, and then here we had the hand kind of holding some sort of writing instrument. Now with the kidneys, we have this hand holding some kind of tool. So as Maggie said at the beginning of the talk, I do stonemasonry, and I can tell you, you can do a lot of stonemasonry with just your hands. For instance, I've done a fair amount of random rubble construction with just by using whatever stones you find. You can stack them up, you can build things. But as soon as you learn to use a carbide hammer, where you can actually shape the stones, even just a little bit, all of a sudden the possibilities just kind of go through the roof in terms of what you can do. And when I think about knitting, with your bare hands, you could take strings and you could weave things together and you could make things. And I don't know anything about knitting other than what I've seen other people around me doing. But with a couple of knitting needles, or maybe even a single knitting needle, I don't know, all of a sudden you can work very quickly and you can create far more elaborate designs. And if you go back to the Zuo Qiang, that character Zuo with this knitting or embroidery, the type of embroidery that you would see around the neck of a garment would almost require some sort of loom or some sort of or needle, some sort of tool in order to get it that tight. The rest of it might be like a hide or something. But to get this part at the top, to clasp it together, you're going to have to put a hole in it. There's going to need to be a button. Things are going to need to be sewed so that it can, hold fast on the body there. That's this character here, this G. And then this next part here, Qiao, I think is very interesting. So this part, so Ji is this kind of technique. Qiao is like this knack or something. Here we have this character, Gong, and it plays the part of a radical there. So this is all one character, but write it a little better. Gong. This character, Gong, it means work. So it refers to some kind of work. And the etymology of it is interesting to me. So sometimes people have said, well, it represents, heaven and earth and kind of connecting the two together. But if you go back to the oracle bones, it was actually written something like this. Something like this. Also, it was written like this. And in another form, it was written like this. Gong, which means work. I don't know exactly what this is, but it looks awfully like a shovel, or something like that, where you have this handle portion at one end, you have this here, which allows you to move stuff, and then you have a longer kind of, handle that connects the sort of the shovel portion and the part at the end. And when I think about just work in general, digging, I think, comes comes to mind pretty quickly. If you think about how you know, animals out in nature, how they're able to you know, say build their homes, the things that they actually kind of build for themselves. There are two options. They can either go out and get kind of fiber elements, such as like twigs and leaves and bits of dross, and create some kind of nest or something, kind of weave it together and knit it together to create like a nest of some kind, like birds do. Or, you know, if it's a rabbit or a badger or a fox or something like that, they're digging in the ground. And for humans, if you've ever kind of made a comparison between how much you can dig with just your hands in the hard ground and how much you can dig with a tool or a pick or a shovel or something like that, where you're digging in the ground, you realize that this notion of work, of really doing work, requires that type of tool. That's something that is that really amplifies what you know, a person could do on their own. This type of gong here in this portion, we're talking about not necessarily work that we're doing, you know, just kind of with only our own faculties. It's work that's somehow amplified by this type of tool or implement. And you know, as far as work goes, digging is one of the hardest types of work that I think that there is. You know, I think everyone has had the experience of doing some gardening or something like that, and you get to digging and you realize just like it is just a huge workout. You know, everything's heavy. You know, you know, the ground is compact and hard, and you have to do it. And after a couple hours of doing it, you know, you feel kind of, you know, stronger and whatnot. So that's this portion, Gong. This next part, this part here is very interesting, because here we're not just talking about work. We're talking about work together with this part here. Now this part, anyhow, this part here referred to this kind of movement, and sometimes it would be written together with this kind of cloud radical. At least in other characters, it would be written together with this cloud radical, and it refers to kind of the curved or curving movement that that water or air might take. So this is interesting to me, because here we have this kind of work aspect, and then over here we have this winding or flowing movement. To me, that is interesting. But if you've ever really been working where and especially once you get good at something, there is an element of this. Not only are you able to kind of do things that aren't just simply straight lines, you can kind of do curves and things, but you start to realize that there are all these kind of flowing, curving movements that allow things to be truly efficient. And it's what creates this qiao, or this knack, or kind of qiao is like a knack or skill. The example that keeps coming to my mind is, have you ever seen these people who do these magic tricks, you know, where they hold a card out and then they make it disappear, and they show you both sides of their hand, and then they make it reappear again. You know, they do it in all this very kind of flowing way. At first, and I've only watched YouTube videos, I haven't actually done this myself, but at first, you know, it's this very mechanical and kind of stiff thing where you're moving it around and the person can kind of see it. But once the person gets good at it, it just becomes this very kind of flowing type of movement. And even digging, you know, when you first start to dig, it's this kind of slow and cumbersome kind of robot movement that you're doing. But after an hour or two, or if you're working on a larger project, let's say you're doing it over the course of the week, you really start to get this kind of flow going where things are starting to kind of have a movement almost like water flowing, but it is still some type of work. It doesn't look like you're doing much of anything. It might just look like a flourish of the hand or something, but somehow it produces this kind of dramatic effect that requires this sort of knack. So the kidneys altogether, we have this 甚至, that which is the kidneys, which again was this I radical together with the hand radical over the flesh radical. 甚至做强之官, it is this kind of like act of creating creating this very elaborately embroidered thing that creates this strength, which is similar to this recurved bow or the irrigated fields. And then the ji qiao, this technical skill and these knacks, this kind of knack emerges from it. When we look at the human body, and we get down to the kind of biochemical level, down to the cellular level, we can see these same themes of the heart and the kidneys at play. So in the cell, you'll have a single nucleus, which contains the genetic material. So this will have, I'll just kind of draw it out like this for now. This is just a pictographic sort of depiction. This would be the nucleus. And then you also have these mitochondria, and we talked about this in the lecture on the heart. These double-celled or double-cell-walled mitochondria that are producing all the ATP, the adenosine triphosphate, and the other energy substrates in the body. Here we have what we tend to think of as our genetic material. So when people talk about, it's in their genes, or I have a or that dog has a genetic predisposition to something, or something like that. We tend to think of all this very elaborate genetic material here, and it is the double helix, the long double helix, double-stranded DNA that forms the chromosomes and is held in the nucleus, and then the nucleus divides and creates two nucleuses in the process of mitosis in order to produce two new cells. But in the mitochondria, and there will be multiples of these throughout the cells, you have many of these mitochondria, depending on the type of cell, depending on how much energy it required, you would have more, fewer or more mitochondria per cell. But you have these mitochondria here. They also have their own genetic material, but this genetic material is circular. And it's a very interesting thing because our cells, the cells that make complex organisms that we see every day, not the microscopic organisms, but I'm talking about plants and animals, humans, which are of course animals as well. They always have this pairing of the mitochondrial DNA and the nuclear DNA. And we can't live without either of them, because this is the source of our kind of energy, and this is the source of all of the kind of elaborate genes that allow us to produce particular proteins. So in this picture, we have the mitochondria, which are producing kind of the light and the heat. They're literally phosphorylating, so they take a phosphorus atom and they put it onto a protein, onto the adenosine, in order to create energy, or an energy substrate that can later be used for various enzymatic and metabolic functions. So here we have this energy producer, and we saw with the heart radical or the heart character rather, how it was related to light and electricity and even to fire with the Junju, with the second character Ju being a picture of like a torch or a candle or something like that. We have that here. And then here in the nucleus, we have this Zuoqiang Zhiguan. We have the very elaborately woven strands of the genetic material. This genetic material here is far longer. It's a far longer and more elaborate sequence than what you see in the mitochondrial DNA. The mitochondrial DNA in comparison is very simple, but it's the mitochondrial DNA that ultimately kind of controls in many respects the way that the nuclear DNA is expressed. And as a matter of fact, it can even be controlling the life or death of the cell. So when the mitochondria starts to detect or realize that the cell isn't getting kind of the energy that it needs, or that things are dysfunctioning in a particular way, if things aren't just right in the cell as far as it's concerned, it will initiate a process whereby the cell is killed, whereby it will actually, die. It's called apoptosis. And it's part of the aging process, but it's also how we stay healthy. When you look at the process of say, cancer results from a number of things, but one of the main kind of crucial keys in the way that cancer results is the cancerous cell, the original cell that produces the cancer, if the mitochondrial function is working correctly, the cell will undergo apoptosis, it will die. But if this mitochondrial function is weak for whatever reason, or it's not doing what it's supposed to do, then all of a sudden the cell just decides it's going to live forever. It's not going to undergo suicide. And so you have these cancer cell lines that are essentially these immortal cell lines. They never undergo apoptosis and never undergo sort of suicide as they should. I realize that we're out of time. Gosh, I wish I had more time to kind of tie these two together. But what I'd like to refer back to, though, is in chapter 8, it says, after it reads through all of the different organs and whatnot, it comes to the end and it says, basically, the most important thing is that the sovereign ruler is bright, so that the heart organ is working correctly, that the junju is Ming, that it's bright. Because if it isn't, then there will be disaster. This is something that should absolutely be avoided. And we see that at least in this kind of picture of the cell.